All right, everybody, let's get started. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Lunchtime Discovery Series. It is good to be back again with you for another edition of our program. My name is Chris Smith, and I will be your host today for the Lunchtime Discovery Series. Today, we've got two very special guests for you who are going to share some interesting stories, insights, and experiences with us, some interesting history as well. But of course, before we get to that, I always have to say thank you to the folks at the Office of Environmental Education within the Department of Environmental Quality within the state of North Carolina, who actually bring this program together. And then it's a broadcast service of us here at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And of course, it's always good to gather with you. We always meet up here right at 12 o'clock, right at the museum's YouTube channel, so that we can meet interesting people who are doing and thinking about interesting things out there in the world of science and nature, education, and more. And as always, we're going to do just that today for today's program. Because April has within it April 22nd, which is a very special day, especially for those of us in science and environment and in nature circles. It's Earth Day. We're celebrating Earth Day all month long here at the Lunchtime Discovery Series. And so we're hearing stories of nature and conservation, past, present, and future all month long. And for today's program, I'm particularly excited because we're actually keeping those stories pretty close to home, at least, right in the museum's backyard. And for those of you who might be tuning in around like Durham and Orange counties, this story, today's program, certainly fits right into your backyard because we're going to be hearing about the Eno River and the Eno River Association, an organization that I have spent a little bit of time with, mostly because they have natural areas and nature preserves that are like right in my backyard that I go and hike and visit all the time. I can tell you where every single bug lives in some of these nature preserves. Anyway, I'm going to give everything away. Let me turn it over to today's special guests. Let me introduce them to you. First off, today you're going to be hearing from Julie Thompson. Julie is an environmental educator and naturalist. Julie, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here.
And after that, folks, we'll be hearing from Kim Livingston. Kim is the Director of Conservation and Stewardship with the Eno River Association. Hi, Kim.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here.
Thanks so much. So, Julie, you have written a new book that involves and engages the Eno River Association. I'm interested to hear it.
Yes. I'd love to read the book, which will take maybe about 10 minutes, just so everyone can hear the book. And then we'll talk more about the Eno after that.
Sounds excellent. Thank you.
All right. Can you see this okay?
Looks good.
Wonderful. All right. So I wrote this book for my community outreach project to receive my North Carolina Environmental Education Certification. So that's where this project comes from. And I'm so excited to share it with you all today. So the title is Saving the Eno River, Margaret Nygard and the Eno River Association. A river is a vibrant thing. It's restorative. It replenishes you after walking on the pavement. This is a quote from Margaret Nygard. Have you ever visited the Eno River? The Eno River starts in Orange County, North Carolina, and flows through the town of Hillsborough, and then into Durham County. From there, the Little River flows into the Eno River, and these flow into the Flat River, where the name changes to the Neuse River, which is now under Falls Lake. Did you ever wonder how the parks and trails along the Eno River were created? How the Eno was saved is an important part of North Carolina's history. This is the story of the people who joined together to protect the Eno River for all of us. There's one woman who led the fight to save the Eno River. Her name was Margaret Nygard. She and her family wanted a home in the country so that they could grow a big garden. They moved from downtown Durham to a historic house on Coal Mill Road. They found that the Eno River ran beside their house. Margaret and her family began to learn about and enjoy the Eno River and the wilderness surrounding them. In time, they found many people who loved the Eno. One day in 1966, Margaret and her friends heard about a plan by the city of Durham to build a dam across the Eno River. This would cause the river to become a lake. The Eno would not be a wild river anymore. The city of Durham was growing and was looking for another source of drinking water for Durham. They thought that building a dam on the Eno River would provide more water for the people of Durham. Margaret and her friends started telling city officials that there were better sources of water, drinking water. A dam across the Eno would put the plants and animals underwater and hide the Eno River Valley's history. Margaret and many other people felt that they had to speak up to save the Eno. They wrote letters to city officials and attended city council meetings. Margaret and her husband, Holger Nygard, and additional community members spoke at city council meetings. They contacted the newspapers with their views about why the Eno River needed to be kept as a wild and scenic river. They talked to more people about how special the Eno was. They also led hikes along the Eno River so that they could introduce the river to many more people in the community. Together in 1966, Margaret and a group of community members formed what became the Eno River Association. Working together as a group, they made their voices heard by city leaders. Preserving and protecting a place like the Eno River Valley is what the nonprofit organization, the Nature Conservancy, does. The Nature Conservancy helped Margaret and Eno River Association members realize that making the land surrounding the Eno into a state park would be the best way to preserve the Eno River and all of the wilderness around it. That way, everyone could enjoy the Eno. Helping protect the Eno was the Nature Conservancy's first project in North Carolina. Members of the Eno River Association continued to write letters, attend and speak at city council meetings, and talk to the media. They also planned ways to introduce more people to the Eno River. These included spring wildflower hikes, winter hikes, and river rafting trips. They researched the history of the Eno River Valley and the people who had lived there. They published this information in a journal called the Eno. They asked experts to help them make lists of all the plants and animals found in the Eno River Valley. They even identified some rare species living there too. They gave talks and slideshows to school and community groups. They also made bumper stickers, created an annual fine art poster, printed old maps of the Eno and drew new maps, and they also held photo contests. Every year they published an art calendar to share the history and photographs of the Eno with even more people. And they kept talking to many people about saving the Eno. They even started a tradition of hiking alongside the Eno River on January 1st. Margaret and members of the Eno River Association continued the long, hard fight to protect the Eno River and to create a state park. They also researched and worked to save additional land along the Eno, including the creation of the City of Durham Park, West Point on the Eno. Then, one day, a city employee and civil engineer named Dr. Tang rechecked the math for a dam across the Eno River. He found that a dam would not result in as much drinking water as the city had thought. Durham City Budget Director Larry Amick suggested using the Tier Quarry as a water reservoir for the city's drinking water. Dr. Tang calculated the capacity for the Tier Quarry and found it would have similar capacity and it would be cheaper. So city officials dropped the plan to dam the Eno. However, the Eno River was not saved yet. The city of Durham needed to sell the land it had bought around the Eno River for the dam that they had planned to build. The city of Durham and the state of North Carolina reached an agreement that the state would buy all of the city's land around the Eno River, and that this land would be the beginning of the Eno River State Park. Many people who own land along the Eno wanted to help make the state park happen. Some donated their land for the park, while others helped by selling their land to the state of North Carolina so that it could be in the park. After many years of hard work by many community groups and conservation groups, all of them working together, hundreds of acres of land along the Eno River were acquired for the Eno River State Park. In 1973, James Holshouser, the governor of North Carolina at the time, announced the creation of the Eno River State Park. Instead of being dammed, the Eno became a state park. The Eno River was protected as a wild river. Trails began to be made so that people could hike alongside the Eno River. In July 1976, the Bicentennial Folklife Festival was presented by the state of North Carolina at West Point on the Eno, a city park. Thousands of people attended. This was a wonderful outdoor event by the Eno with music, art, crafts, and food. In 1980, the Eno River Association liked the idea and held a festival for the Eno in the same place. The Festival for the Eno became a yearly tradition and continues to be held every July. The festival raises money to help conserve more land along the Eno River for parks and nature preserves. While they prevented the dam across the Eno River and created the Eno River State Park, there was still more work to do. Since the Eno River is about 40 miles long before it joins the Little and Flat Rivers to become the Neuse River, there are thousands of acres to try to acquire and preserve on both sides of the river. The Eno River Association keeps working with more people and organizations to create more parks and nature preserves, including West Point on the Eno, which was created in 1976, Penny's Bend Nature Preserve, which opened in 1983, Occoneechee Mountain State Natural Area, which opened in 1997, the Confluence Natural Area, which opened in 2018, and in 22, efforts began to add these properties to the Eno River State Park: the historic Occoneechee Speedway Trail, the James M. Johnston Nature Preserve, as well as parts of the Mountains to Sea Trail. And Kim will tell us more about those later. In 1988, Margaret Nygard was awarded the first National Alexander Calder Award for Conservation in Washington, D.C. by Secretary of State Stuart Udall. However, in 1995, Margaret Nygard died suddenly, and many people grieved. For all of her hard work and perseverance to save the Eno, Margaret Nygard received the Order of the Longleaf Pine from Governor James Hunt. This is the highest honor that a community member in North Carolina can receive. Millions of people have visited the parks and preserves along the Eno River. Many people enjoy hiking, canoeing, and kayaking, or spending time at the Eno to get a break away from the busy cities where they live. It has been over 50 years since the Eno River Valley lands became a state park, but the Eno still needs your help. The Eno River Association still works to protect the Eno River from development and pollution and to preserve more land for the parks. The work to protect the Eno is never ending. If a project is proposed that could harm the Eno and the plants and animals that live there, you may need to speak up for the river too. It will be necessary for all of us to continue to work to protect the Eno always. And that's the end of the book.
Julie, thank you very much. I will encourage everyone to drop their clapping hands emojis into the chat just to say thank you for sharing your work with us. And it's such a compelling story to think about the ways that in the 60s, getting into the early 1970s, as the federal government, for example, is thinking about things like the Endangered Species Act, as conservation organizations are thinking about starting Earth Day, which would only be 4 years after 1966 and this Damming the Eno project in 1970, the ways that individuals within their communities were working to protect their pieces of nature, their wild places and scenic places, places important to the local communities and ecologies where they are, like the River and Margaret Nygard.
Yeah, I think that is the absolutely remarkable part of the story. They were so ahead of their time. Like you said, they formed the River Association in 1966. They began figuring out what they could do even just before that. And Earth Day doesn't even start, as a kind of recognized day until 1970. So they're right in the midst, but they're part of the Earth Day story. And without them, we wouldn't have this amazing wilderness and wild river that the Eno is. And I think that's something that the quote that the book starts with. There is such a need for wild places. And again, now we have books that tell us that. They even have research. But I just love that they could sense that, Margaret Nygard, and then all of the early members and community members who spoke up for the Eno, they could feel that we would need those in the future, but they could feel that this was such a special place in that moment in time too.
So tell me a little bit about what brought you to this project.
Yeah, I have various relationships to the Eno River. I lived in Durham for about 12 years and Hillsborough for 1 year. My first introduction to the Eno was working as a summer camp counselor with Schoolhouse of Wonder. So I heard a version of this story at that camp, but it was really only read once. And I always wanted to know more. So I'd ask people about Margaret Nygard. Luckily, the annual calendar that the Eno River Association publishes still happens, but that also kind of was, I think, after my next, here's some of the history, here are some of the people, here's the organization that I heard people talk about. And then I went on the winter hikes that the Eno River Association does and the spring wildflower hikes, which again, they started, as I tell it in this book, back in the 1960s to introduce and connect people with the Eno, but the Eno River Association continues those traditions today. Also, I started going on the first day hikes, which again, this is one of the first day hikes in North Carolina, which, it was a trend, but through national parks, but it was so great to have the Margaret and the Eno River Association bring that tradition to North Carolina. And to the Eno River in particular. And a couple of years ago, I forget what number we're on now, but they celebrated the 50th first day hike. And so I just love that these were histories that were accessible still, but they were also kind of stories and knowledge held by the people who were part of the effort. And so I felt like I kind of I really dreamed of writing this as a book that could be read by children. Now I think it's a book for any ages. It seems like ages 8 and up can read it for most children. So, it is a story that's kind of hoped that children will read, but I also hope adults will read it too, because I think this is a story that some people know if they've lived here. But new people are always moving and discovering the Eno. And so hopefully this shares some of the history that, of course, once you start digging, you can find this history. But I just wanted to make it in an accessible way that especially children could learn the story too.
Yeah, it's really excellent stuff. And it sounds like your connection to the Eno River runs pretty deep.
Definitely. And it deepened even further when I worked for about 1.5 years as the naturalist at the Eno River State Park. And that was just a dream come true. I got to present and plan programs, and I got to delve deeper into the cultural history and natural history, but also just hiking a trail every day and learning it. I brought some images, I think, from some of those experiences that I can share here. I think also too, I kind of became a naturalist. How one becomes a naturalist is an interesting question too. But I became really interested in Penny's Bend Nature Preserve. So I went there at least once a month for a period of 2 years before I went and started working for the state park. But that helped me understand, kind of just know the river monthly. If I'd lived closer, I would have gone much more frequently, but I was downtown Durham, and it really just helped me see what creatures come out when, what wildflowers bloom when, and discover them, and really get to know a place deeply. Let's see, I wanted to share this photo. There's some other images, some of them are in the book and some of them aren't, but there's this wonderful photograph of Margaret that was made by David Page for an article. And I wanted to add here too that both Margaret and her husband Holger had PhDs in English from California, University of California, Berkeley, and they moved to the Triangle region and the Eno River Valley because Holger got a job as a professor at Duke. So they had that kind of Duke community in which to work, but they lived in Durham for a while, but then they moved out to the country because they really wanted to have a big garden. And the Eno River was in their backyard. And I do think maybe their perspective of not everywhere has a river like this, not everywhere has wilderness like this. We need to make sure we keep this in the wild state it is through any means possible. That inspired their activism and work for the Eno, and their kind of, hey, we need to speak up for this river, we need to speak up for this place, and urging other people to join in that effort. Newspapers are amazing. Newspapers.com is a great way to find out this history in even more detail than I have written it. Also, too, Margaret Nygard's papers are at the Wilson Library at the University of North Carolina, and she has scrapbooks where they saved all the articles and everything. So anyone who wants to find even more about the history, those are two great ways to do it. These are the color versions of the bumper stickers too that the Eno River Association made. These were designed by George Pine, and they were hand silk screened and screen printed. And so just imagine these really bright, vivid green bumper stickers on people's cars. I think one thing that I really admire is that their effort to save the Eno was a multimedia effort. And we talk about that very easily today, but I don't think, I wonder if that's how they thought of it at the time. But so they had newspaper coverage about what they were doing. They're contacting the newspapers. They were making bumper stickers. Here's a letter to the editor that Margaret Nygard wrote. And I love how this one ends about how they hope to keep the Eno free flowing even after the year 2020. And we're there, and the Eno is a free-flowing river, as it was. And even work is being done to make it even more free-flowing in certain parts too. But their vision was also long. And so they could imagine that we would be here and wanting and needing the Eno in this year of now, even 2023. In part of the multimedia campaign, they even included cakes, which I just love that of, how far does a multimedia campaign go? Well, when you're having community gatherings, there's food, but here you have Margaret with a Save the Eno cake, and then you have this other exquisite, very large cake that says Eno. So multimedia can include cakes. I can keep sharing these if that makes sense. The Festival for the Eno, I think, is again another way that this community has continued to be built, and advocacy for the Eno has continued. Again, it started as the 1976 North Carolina Bicentennial Folklife Festival, and then the Eno River Association decided to make it an annual festival in July of every year, starting in 1980. And we have so many bands who have played there. Here's one of the festival stages. Even to North Carolina legends like Elizabeth Cotton played at that first Folklife Festival. So just the amazing range of musicians. And I think, again, part of that multimedia. Let's bring in the artists. Let's bring in the designers. Let's bring in the photographers. Let's bring in the musicians and even dancers. So many parts of arts are part of this campaign and helped inspire people to know and love the Eno through all of that. I wanted to also just do a mention of the Eno Fest this year. It's the 44th annual, and it will take place July 1st and July 4th. So of course you can visit enoriver.org for more information.
Excellent, excellent stuff. Kim, I want to go ahead and bring you and your voice into the program because now it seems like we're really getting into what the Eno River Association is up to, what's going on, what's been going on, what's new, and events like Eno Fest. Welcome to the program again.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Julie. What a great book. I love seeing a very great summary of all of the past work of the Eno River Association. So yeah, as Julie said, it has been a long effort in conserving, preserving the Eno River, and our efforts still continue today. And what I really liked where Julie was going was really defining what our mission is at the Eno River Association. So she did a good job of pulling out all those aspects. So our mission is to conserve and protect the natural, the cultural, and the historic resources of the Eno River Valley. So where we talk a lot about protecting the river and the wild places, but one thing that we also try to do here at the association is look for those places that are culturally significant, historically significant, and maybe not just colonial history either, but looking deeper and further back, and some of the histories that are oftentimes forgotten. And so I just love the where you were going there, Julie. So just to give a little summary of where we are in time with the Eno River Association. So for the past 57 years, we've been working to protect land. We buy land outright. So just like you would buy your house, we buy land either for public ownership, or we actually hold preserves ourselves and hold land ourselves. And then we also do something called a conservation easement, which leaves land in private hands, but it adds restrictions to that piece of property. So it's just another tool of protection for the Eno. So to date, we're up to over 7,600 acres of protected lands through our efforts throughout our watershed, which is just really great, especially in this really urbanizing area. And that includes 7 parks. And I love saying 7 because we have a brand new one, which is our 7th, which is Panther Branch, which is officially opening on Earth Day. But we also like to pat ourselves on the back for helping establish 75% of the lands that we've protected open to the public. And so that includes things like Eno River State Park, Occoneechee Mountain, Penny's Bend, a lot of the places Julie's been mentioning to you. Of the 76 that we've helped protect, 4,500 of those are within Eno River State Park. So it's been a huge part of our mission for a very long time, and something that we pride ourselves on, and something that we also help continue. And so that's really what I'm here for today, is to give you that little brief update of, hey, this is where we are now from the great work that Margaret started so long ago, but also to tell you about an exciting addition to Eno River State Park that's coming this fall. So if you all are familiar with Orange County at all, the area here that is a light gray is the town of Hillsborough. And everything that's sort of hashed with green is existing conserved land. And the green hash is Eno River State Park or Occoneechee Mountain. So you'll see that there is this very exciting red corridor along the Eno that stretches from some existing Eno River State Park land all the way into the historic core of downtown Hillsborough. And this is really unique. To my understanding, there isn't a state park here in North Carolina that goes into the actual downtown core. And there is definitely state parks in municipal boundaries, but not really all the way down to the downtown area. So This is a land transaction that we have been working on for the last few years. This land is currently owned by Classical American Homes Preservation Trust. And they came to us because they knew that we were the good folks that could help them figure out the next stewards of this land. And through some talking with many different organizations, agencies, municipalities, counties, etc., we sort of landed that this was a really good fit for Eno River State Park. So this is a tract of land. Both the red and the orange there are 226 acres. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. If Julie, you want to advance that slide. So there are 2.8 miles of river frontage within this 226 acres. There's 4 miles of existing trail. So if you've ever gone to downtown Hillsborough, you may have walked Riverwalk. And Riverwalk stretches through that orange, near that orange highlighted area or outlined area, and along that yellow dotted line. It stops right around Elizabeth Brady Road. And then it picks up with the North Carolina Mountains to Sea Trail. And that is a trail that it stretches from our mountains to coast. And this section here is through Eno River State Park and through Hillsborough Riverwalk area. So the piece that's highlighted here is the piece that will go over to Eno River State Park. This includes both the historic Occoneechee Speedway. So if you are familiar at all with the Occoneechee Speedway, or if you're not, it's a really interesting thing to discover in downtown Hillsborough. So this is a historic NASCAR dirt track from the inaugural NASCAR race of 1949. This track was active for about 20 years. And then race car drivers decided they needed paved trails that they could go faster on. So they sort of abandoned this idea of these dirt tracks. What's really cool about this is that this dirt track is still preserved today, and you can walk on it, you can hike on it, you can explore it. It's quite interesting to just think about these cars racing around in this area. So this here touches on that historic cultural piece that's so important to Eno River Association. And then we also have the James N. Johnson Nature Preserve. And this was a fantastic foresight by the founder of Classical American Homes Preservation Trust, where he recognized that this area was super important. This land was acquired by him to really stop this bypass that was proposed down Elizabeth Brady Road that was going to go through Hillsborough. And it was going to impact Airmount, which is one of their historic properties. And so he began buying up this land and preserving it. He worked with the state, and he dedicated that portion of land as the nature preserve, and then also protected the speedway. So you can go to the next slide. Oh, well, I just told you all of this. So here it is. But yes, so this land will become, this 206 acres will become part of Eno River State Park. It contains that section of trail, tying straight into Riverwalk. So you'll be able to walk from downtown Hillsborough. Actually, soon you'll be able to walk all the way from 7 Mile Creek Natural Area, which is an Orange County owned natural area, through Occoneechee Mountain, through downtown Hillsborough, all the way to Falls Lake. On Mountains to Sea Trails. This is just a really important corridor for that. And then there's also some land that's what we call unencumbered, which means it has no easements or anything on it, that the park plans to sort of have an area available if infrastructure is needed for the park. So the next section of land is this really interesting 20 acres. So this is not going over to Eno River State Park. We have decided to partner with the Archaeological Conservancy, which is a nationwide conservancy working to preserve our indigenous sites across the country. And interesting enough, UNC has been doing research in Hillsborough since the 80s, and there are 4 known early settlements dating back to 81,000. right in downtown Hillsborough. And this also includes an early settlement of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. There are remnants of some of their village sites, and it's a sacred burial ground as well. And so this is a really important piece, and something that we hold dear, and others do as well, to really preserve that, make it known that this exists, to lift up those stories of the people who lived on the banks of the Eno before us and who were the first stewards of this land. And so we felt it was really important to give that over to the folks who really know how to care for that land and lift up that land. And so this piece, this 20 acres, will go to the Archaeological Conservancy this fall as well. And I believe that is it for me to share that really exciting update. So we look forward to transferring this land, having it included in the state park, keeping it open for public enjoyment, but also really conserving and lifting up those histories as we've just talked about.
Excellent, excellent stuff. Thank you, Kim. So I'm curious, I have a question for you. Besides that, a piece of property or a parcel is on the Eno River, what other considerations does Eno River Association take into account when it's thinking about acquiring pieces of property like this? Because you know, we're looking at some of these maps, and there's also development tracts and home sites that also come right up against the river. Having walked Riverwalk in Hillsborough and all sorts of areas along the Eno River, there's also lots of people that live along the river today, I guess, as they always have. So I'm just curious about how you think about which places to acquire and how it fits into the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have what we call our ranking criteria for land in the watershed. So we don't just look on the Eno River itself. We look at the watershed as a whole. And that includes both the Little River, as you learned from Julie's presentation. The Little River is a tributary of the Eno River, and then they merge into the Flat. And so we work in the Little River watershed as well as the Eno River watershed. So one thing that we look for is how that piece of property hits on all aspects of our mission. So for the environmental features, we look at things like waterways and water quality. If there are any rare or endemic species on the property, either plants or animals. And so things like that, we look if it's intact forest land, if there's good, ecological communities on the property. So really those very traditional environmental features of a piece of land, that goes into the ranking criteria. And then we also start to look at if there's any historical significance to the property or cultural significance. And for example, we work with our farming community to keep land viable for farmland into the future. And so, is it an active farm, and can we help protect that piece of land to ensure that it is farmland into the future? Does it have good ag soils and things like that? So we look at those cultural aspects. And then the other thing that we also look at is more of a vulnerability index, or that social side of things. And so is this in an area that is easily accessible by lower income folks or people of color? And so we look at those sorts of social aspects of a piece of land as well, wanting to provide equal access to folks, as well as safe and accessible places for folks' enjoyment. And then we also, of course, look at things like connectivity. So one of the big projects that we've been working on for a while is something called the Eno New Hope Landscape Conservation Group. It's a mouthful, but essentially we're looking at the connection between the Eno River watershed and the New Hope Creek watershed, which is just to the south, and looking for those viable wildlife corridors, because we can protect land and bubbles all day long, but if we don't connect them, we are getting a lot of species decline. And so we look at those corridors, and we also look at what is in the master plans of all of our partners, such as Eno River State Park. So a lot goes into it. And actually, you queued me up perfectly to talk about our new strategic plan, which I'll just mention briefly. But we just launched our new 5-year strategic plan, which is ambitious. It has a lot of growth. We have a lot of identified goals within the first couple years. And one of those is actually to develop a very strategic conservation plan. So even more than just a ranking criteria, but look at the watershed as a whole and develop a model that really gives us scores for each piece of property based on all the criteria that I talked about, so that we can be a lot more proactive about the protection moving into the future, given the rapid development.
If folks wanted to see that, is it available for River Association, like members of the group, or is that publicly available?
Yeah, our strategic plan is available on our website and available to all. We also have our annual report from 2022 if you want to get deep into what we accomplished. And then once we launch our strategic conservation plan, we'll certainly send out a notice about what went into that and what we will do to move conservation forward in the Eno.
Excellent stuff. Julie, I saw that you went back to these gorgeous photos of some of the wildflowers. It sort of is inviting the question of if you've got a story that's here.
Totally. I just wanted, since Kim brought up, kind of how value gets decided or assessed, I just thought I'd share some of the treasures of the Eno River. And again, as a naturalist, I had so much opportunity to learn the spots where these are and to share them with people through programs through the park. And so many, the Eno River Association does this through their spring wildflower hikes. And, West Point and the Eno has so many public programs too. We're just past these spring wildflowers, but mark your calendars for next February. And don't miss trout lily time, because they're these wonderful yellow wildflowers that have these leaves that people have said remind them of speckled trout. But as a child called them, their flowers are kind of like a banana split flower. And so these are just one of my favorite wildflowers that I didn't know before I got to know the Eno. And just this is one of my moments of when I see the trout lilies, I know it's spring. And it's such a delight. Dutchman's breeches are also another of the more rare, again, how these get classified. Scientists and botanists have more precise criteria, but maybe you see them less around, but they are found in parts along the Eno. Those, again, were probably right on the edge that they've already ended, but mark your calendars for late April and early May, because the mountain laurel will be coming up, and that's what you see pictured on the right here. This photo is made right by the Fuse Forward access. So if you kind of walk up by the small falls there, you should be able to see them in bloom. But also the James M. Johnston Nature Preserve is just a mountain laurel paradise. So if folks have not seen mountain laurel in bloom, venture out to the Eno late April, early May. Some people think Mother's Day, but again, a little earlier might be better, the way things are trending this time of year. And then I did want to show pictures of two of rarer species that are at the Eno River State Park. One is the Roanoke bass, which, again, many amazing fish can be found in the Eno. I think over 60 species have been listed. But this is also known as the red-eyed bass, but, a fish that is only found in the Eno River watershed, as well as to the fairly uncommon, rare, the yellow lady slipper, which is, again, usually anytime this month. They're harder to find, but luckily, the Eno River Association and park programs sometimes are able to share these with visitors. Of course, the Neuse River water dog is, I don't have a picture of it because I've never seen one in hand, and I'm sorry I forgot to include that. But another species that is found in the Eno River watershed and very rare, but also needs the really clean water of the Eno in order to exist.
Julie, a question came into the chat on YouTube for you. They want to know what your favorite part of creating the book was.
Well, I think it was actually, I'd emailed a little bit with Eric Nygard, but it was getting to know the Nygard children, so Margaret and Holger's children more. So Kirsten Nygard helped a lot with this book, but it was a conversation in writing the story with Kirsten, Jenny Nygard, and Eric Nygard. And so I think just really getting to talk to them, getting to know them, figuring out how we tell the story together, just because it is their family's story as well as the Eno River Association story. And I have so much hope for this book in terms of spreading the story. I think so many people love the Eno, so that I do not have to convince anyone who's been there. It's an easy place and wonderful parks to fall in love with. But I guess this is kind of this, how did we get this amazing place? How did it become a state park? Who made that possible? And I just find the story so inspiring that it was community members who recognized the value of this river and this place, and they did everything they could to save it for us to experience today. So I would say getting to know the Nygard children, and really sharing the story. I also did a fundraiser campaign later back in the winter. And so the 40 elementary schools in Durham and in Hillsborough, the public elementary schools, they each have a copy of this book in their school's library, and the Hillsborough Public Library, as well as the Durham Main Library, have a copy in their catalog too. So people can buy the book, but I also wanted to make sure it got to places where classes and students might be able to use it too.
Excellent stuff. It puts me in mind that in this part of North Carolina, at least I know, 100 years ago, there weren't very many trees or forests along the Eno River or throughout most of the Piedmont. 100 years ago, it was farmland, or 120 years ago, it was farmland. But then it gets set aside in various ways, or falls out of use for farming or development or whatever the uses had been, and becomes forest and becomes a valuable watershed that we have today, and then becomes protected spaces. But through all of that, it's constantly been under change and at some points under threat. And it sort of makes me wonder what is facing the Eno River and its watersheds today that, for example, Eno River Association is thinking about and planning for as they think 5 years ahead, or, as someone like Margaret Nygard was probably thinking, and as mentioned in the newspaper clipping you showed, she was thinking about protecting the Eno in 2020. What does Eno River Association or the communities of people who use and live along the Eno think about, as we look forward another 50 years?
Kim, can I comment on this from the historical perspective, and then you can say the current? So I think that's what also another part of the work that the Eno River Association and Margaret Nygard and many community members did. Jean Bradley Anderson was a genealogist. They researched who lived on the Eno, who used it, and they got to know these people. And some of those people still, lived, or they sold their land to the state park. But my understanding is the Fuse Ford access of Eno, the last time the timber was harvested there was around 1940. But the Grover Cleveland Shaw, he was a community member who bought and held on to the land that is now the Buckquarter Creek Trail there. And he even was he'd have these wonderful quotes of, he bought the land when he couldn't afford it, and he held on to it when he should have sold it, but he wanted to make sure that people could visit the Eno and to keep it in its wild state. So once he bought the land, it wasn't farmed since then, it wasn't cut since then. So he is one of the big community members who's also part of this history and part of the story. But, there used to be a schoolhouse kind of near the Fuse Ford access. The Piper Cox house is still there. And I think that, there's so many mills that were along the history, along the Eno River. And that's part of the history too. But, the Piper Cox house has been preserved. And so that kind of presence of that home and that house allow that history to come forward too. And I think one of the wonderful parts of having that house open when I was working as a naturalist at the state park is people who are younger would come in and be like, I could imagine living here, or this would be really peaceful. So, I think that also opportunity that the Eno River State Park and all of the lands that have been preserved allow us to think what the land was like before, even if that's just, 80 or so years before we're in now. And then again, these amazing tracks that were home to the Occaneechi band of the Saponi Nation that are Hillsborough, and so many decades of research have been done there to really understand the story of the Native and Indigenous people who lived along the Eno too. So I think I just wanted to say the history. I'm a historian, so I'm always interested in sharing the history, but also the Eno River Association, that being part of their mission, the cultural history and the naturalist history, they helped us understand so much about the history that's still available through the journals that they published, and so many historical resources too.
Yeah, and I think looking forward, you're right, Julie. One of the things that we want to make sure is that those histories aren't forgotten, and all of the histories, and even some of the old untold histories. So that is important work, and something that we do through our educational programs, through our journals, which Julie mentioned, through our calendars, all of that sort of stuff. There's a lot that goes into our calendar, more than just a pretty picture. It's a lot of research, there's a lot of history in those. And then, uplifting a lot of that culture through our festival. Our festival is just sort of it's a celebration, but it also brings everything together into one, which is really nice. But I think as far as land conservation goes and what we face moving into the future, and something that we are really thinking about, number one is climate change as well as environmental justice, which often times go hand in hand. It's things that we can't ignore. And so that's something that we're working really hard to integrate in everything that we're doing now. And then also just thinking about development, because there's massive amounts of development happening in Durham and in Orange. And it's not that we're anti-development, we are pro-smart development, and really working on the inside through advocacy, working with our legislators and our city officials and things like that, to start putting practices in place, and now in future land use maps and all of those sorts of things to set us up for a smart future. And so that's something that we are really working on doing. Our roots began in advocacy. We definitely had a period of time where we focused more on land acquisition and things like that. And now we're really returning back to those advocacy roots to really ensure that Durham and Orange continue to be a place where people want to live, but and that takes both development, and it also takes our natural areas that everybody loves so much. And so how do we balance those in the face of climate change, environmental justice, and all of those accesses to nature and things like that?
And I think with climate change, one of the really great records that the Eno River has, because of the association's efforts and these wildflower hikes, they have so much data. They have over 50 years of data of knowing when certain wildflowers bloom, what creatures live where. And so all of this flora and fauna species lists that the Eno River Association put together in the 70s and in the earlier days are amazing data and records to have for a specific local place, that then again can be used in the climate change present to understand how many things are shifting.
That's fantastic. Love everything about all of that. Julie, Kim, thank you for joining us today on the Lunchtime Discovery Series.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's a delight to share this book with a wider audience. And if anyone out there has never been to the Eno, please go, because it's one of our most special places in North Carolina. And Eno River State Park, ncparks.gov has all the information. Of course, enoriver.org also has all of the information for all of the sites that the Eno River Association has preserved that aren't part of the state park too.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a nice day spending the last hour.
Yes, it's been lovely. So we dropped links to upcoming Lunchtime Discovery Series programs and the newsletter link there in the chat on YouTube for all of the viewers. The link also, if anyone's interested in getting a copy of Julie's book, the link is there in the YouTube chat as well. So you can click over to the Eno River Association's website and see that. Thanks again to our guests, folks. We'll be back here again next Wednesday at noon with another edition of our program. I hope that you'll join us. Come on and tune in. You can subscribe to the museum's YouTube channel. Click the bell next to the subscribe button to get notified when we go live with programs. You'll get the notification and you can jump right on into our show. That way you never miss it. You can also sign up for the Lunchtime Discovery Series email listserv. There you will get the YouTube link in your inbox every week, so that when you're ready, you can jump over and come in here and join us as we hear just great stories from people who are working in science, nature, education, and more. Again, thank you to our guests. Thanks for all of the efforts and the work they're doing. Folks, take care, stay safe. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.